know it's a difficult question, and I'm going to try to ask it again. At what point does a video game become art? Is it the narrative? You guys almost unanimously said that Super Mario Brothers at the time, just a toy. Mm-hmm. Where in a video game does it transition into art? When does it become no longer a toy, and now this is a work of art? And not something that over time becomes a work of art, because The Wolf Among Us just came out. Mm-hmm. I played it, first minute, I was like, this is art. Mm-hmm. So at what point do we define a video game as art? Because we know that they are now, but where did that start happening?
As far as like what characteristics or...
Yeah. For you, what was the first game that you put in and thought to yourself, this is art?
Well, that really boils down to the actual person.
Yeah. I mean, it could only be the actual person, really, because, I mean, all we have is our opinions. I mean, art can't really be...
Yeah, like we said, it's all of this is art. It's just your sliding scale of, you know...
And also, whenever you decided that you started realizing how much it was affecting you. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, whenever I was 5 and playing a game, I wasn't really thinking about it that way. I was thinking of it just as something I wanted to play this. I wasn't thinking about the story or anything like that. But then as you become older and you start to realize.
If I was a parent, just to tell you where I'm coming from, if I were a parent and I had bought my 8-year-old, which I was at the time, a Nintendo Entertainment System and the original Super Mario Brothers, and saw him playing, I would look at it and say, this is art. From the landscape to the cloud with a smiley face that follows you and drops like that is super creative. That is so outlandish.
When I first got my Sega Genesis...
Well, it works. It makes you feel immersed.
When I had a Sega Genesis, we got Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and we got Echo the Dolphin. And I swear to God, for the first few months, my dad was playing more than I was, because he sat down there and he played all the way through that Echo the Dolphin. Wouldn't let me play. Mm-hmm. Like, he was just staring at it, and he was actually like following the story and walking around and reading everything that everything said. And
that's awesome. Does he still play?
No. No, I think that was about the only thing that I ever sat down and actually played with him. But every time I got a new Echo the Dolphin game, by God, that Dad won played. I don't know why, but but I was even going to say earlier, my mom. There's a few games that I played on we had one big TV in the living room, and that's where I wanted to play my video games. So Mom would sit there and she'd either read a book or read the newspaper. There's quite a few games that I played that when I later on got a TV, she'd be like, so what happened at the end? Like, you know, I always thought she was sitting there reading. Final Fantasy X was the main one that I was always sitting there playing, and she's like, well, what happened next? And I'd always like, oh, Mom, there's another cutscene. Like, come in here and watch it. I think that she was more amazed by the cut scenes and stuff like that too. But she watched me play all the way through Jak and Daxter. Always asked, what happened next? Like, what happened at the end? And so I almost asked Mom on Facebook, like, her question, just to see what she would say. Just to get the parents. Mom never played anything with me, but
we should totally do that. We should totally poll like your mom and like ask her, and then next week we should be like, hey, this is what the
mom read almost all my Sonic the Hedgehog comics and stuff like that too. Like, I'd get a new one and she'd open it up before I did.
But once again, though, it's subjective,
of course,
because I mean, like, this is just a personal preference. I listen like during the week. I'm not a radio listener. I don't care for radio. I rather listen to stuff just random. Like, I love comedy albums, but I also do like some of the podcasts. Like, I listen to some of the Kevin Smith stuff, and he's of course a big comic book. He wrote for comic books, but of course he made his own movies. But you can tell his love for comics, and he pushes that comics are an art form, which I agree. Comics are an art form, definitely. But there are the few episodes where he'll talk, and they always kind of like reference video games a little bit, but you can tell they don't understand them.
Yeah.
But I wish, me personally, I could just get to them and show them, because I know, like, certain games, that if they would actually take the chance and actually sit down and watch it, would realize what it takes and how some of these games are real art forms. Like, one of my, I always go back to this one because it left such of an imprint on me because of, I guess, the message it conveyed, but the original BioShock. Because of how strong of a narrative it was done, even though your character doesn't talk. You're doing your own actions, but you're hearing it from audio logs. And through that story, you learn a strong narrative, and it has a very strong message for you.
And I know a lot of people, when they talk about video games and art, they usually go back to Shadow of the Colossus.
That one's
Because
a big
there's
one too.
nothing...
Never played. So mad. So mad. I need to play it.
Because there's like nothing spoken, it's just...
Yes.
And there's really no other battles besides the giant monsters, and every giant monster is defeated a different way, and just...
Yep.
Eco was like that. The original, or I don't know.
I never
how
beat
other
it.
people- the original Eco got me because I realized I was playing the game, not even thinking about it. That voice acting was like a big thing at the time, and I had played it for like 2 hours, and not a single word was spoken, and I didn't even notice. And I only got that sensation one more time much later when I saw a Pixar film called WALL-E.
God, I
Yeah.
love that movie.
And I loved that movie, but I didn't even realize that I was watching it for 45 minutes and not a word was going on. But I was getting the story for 45 minutes.
Well, also this is goes way back, 2001: Space Odyssey.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
How much speech is in that movie, and how much of it is conveyed? The story is conveyed, and a lot of people don't understand the story until you actually really sit down and pay attention to what's going on. But once you do, you realize what's going
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. And I think that speaks to the power of art. Because my thing as a kid, the thing that made me angry as a kid, is because I had difficulty expressing how I felt, and I had a very difficult life at that age. And I had a lot of difficulty expressing how I felt and being able to convey, because my situation was so unique to everybody else that was around me or in my school, and that I turned to music. And I used to actually, like, my teddy bear was an acoustic guitar, because my dad was a musician, so I would grab his guitar and I would just strum, and I was all on my own at that time. But then I eventually learned like 4 chords, was able to write songs, and my dad tried to help me with that by getting me a teacher. But then, you know, the teacher was like, well, we can't teach this kid because he doesn't want to learn, he wants to write. And they just couldn't teach, so my dad just got me a book, and he was like, these are the chords, play, you know, and learn and figure out what you want to write. And I wrote songs ever since. To have that connection, I think, is awesome. I think video games make that connection without speaking a word, and when they can do that and they can talk to me without saying a word, to me that's the most magnificent thing, because that's what I always want to achieve with music. And when I look at video games, I say, wow, I do the music thing and I love doing it, and I just want to express myself with this one little thing. But music is really just that one little thing when you look at a video game now. Like before, I mean, Super Mario Brothers was maybe a guy, maybe a team of 6 guys. I don't know what the making of Super Mario Brothers entailed, but I'm assuming it was a dozen or less people working to make the game. We're now at the point where, like, I played Assassin's Creed Revelations, and I was in awe because it just kept saying Ubisoft Montreal, Ubisoft this, Ubisoft that, Ubisoft this, Ubisoft that. And then, like, the credits for Brotherhood were just oh my god, is this still going on? Like, what the hell? I just watched the whole show of something else for 45 minutes. These credits are still rolling. Like, that's what games are now. And to see, like, that collaboration, like, I had such difficulty in a band just working with 4 other people where everybody wanted to put their own little bit into it. But to have these, like, hundreds and hundreds of people, all artists, all really creative, all with stuff to express, all putting it together and being able to put it in a game, that's amazing shit to me. And that's why I'm enamored, and that's what keeps me coming back. Because if it was all just Super Mario and just jumping around, I'd be done by now. I'd be looking for something else to pass the time. And that's probably why I'm still upset with Nintendo, because they're still kind of a toy maker. But, you know, where I'm enamored and the stuff that keeps me going, that keeps me coming back for more, is to have that kind of depth, to have that kind of communication without a word being spoken or without the person being there. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by the Mario has always been art, but Nintendo's a toy maker. But anyway,
well, Nintendo approaches it as a toy maker.
Well, so I don't know that they do.
The assets have artistic merit, but the narrative, the moving forward part is not. It's still geared towards kids. Like, let's distract kids with this toy.
But I thought we just established it didn't necessarily need a narrative to be art.
It doesn't.
Okay.
It has
But-
artistic merit as assets. It's not the collaborative work that I was just talking about, like a Skyrim. You're not going to get a Skyrim on a Nintendo console. You're not going to get something with that kind of depth and that kind of value and that kind of communication between you and them. That's not there. That's not Nintendo's key. They have artists that are making visual arts. They have programmers there that are making it a fine-tuned game, but they're not, they're targeting only children.
Metroid Prime.
Yes.
The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword.
I haven't played Skyward Sword.
Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem.
The new Bayonetta.
Point made.
Bayonetta 2.
But
Well,
yeah,
Bayonetta is a third party.
Well, I mean, so it was
Still,
Eternal Darkness,
they
but
chose
I
to
mean,
put it on the Wii
Nintendo
U,
was
I
heavily
think
involved in
that's
the
the point.
development. Yeah, exactly.
and that's really just because that's the company's viewpoint. Just because it's the company's viewpoint doesn't necessarily mean that it's discredited as being a form of art.
Because they had the same viewpoint with Mario.
Oh, yeah.
And we
No,
established
that's not what
that.
I wasn't saying that it wasn't art. I was saying Nintendo views itself as a toy maker. They'll tell you that.
Well,
The
truly,
entertainment
well, I mean,
company.
I mean, we just
Yeah.
had it from Reggie. He
But the-
basically just said what made him.
But that's how all
Just express
corporations
the
are, though. I mean, look at
Well,
Sony.
no.
Sony doesn't see
Sony's not a
themselves.
toy maker.
But that's my point, though. They don't see themselves as artists, though. They see themselves as a manufacturer of electronic goods. But everyone agrees. Well,
Not
there's
on
a
the PlayStation brand, no. That's
Well, no, we're talking
absolutely
Sony.
not what they view themselves at. You can go back to E3 2013, and see Mark Cerny's whole keynote. It has nothing to do with being a toy maker. It has nothing to do with being an electronics manufacturer. It's about creating immersive worlds that communicate with the player. He'll tell you that.
Well,
That is the messaging from there.
sure.
The messaging from Microsoft is that they want to give you this all-in-one entertainment piece in the living room and bring all of these art forms to you. They don't call them art forms, but that's what they want to bring to you. Nintendo flat out says, toy maker. So it's,
I got to find that quote.
Yeah.
You said it so many times. I got to find that quote where they say, "We're a toy maker. We make toys. We don't make anything that has any
no,
intrinsic
I
they
don't
value."
don't say that they don't make anything that doesn't blah 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 blah.
Okay.
Well, I understand what you're saying about how they market towards children with the bright
Right.
colors and the,
Sure.
this and
That
that.
is
The
their
more
audience. They're not
the more
shying away
fam-
from that being their audience. We know that that's their audience.
But do they have to be taken seriously as a maker of artistic material? Is
No,
the thing.
absolutely not. But if
Okay.
me as an adult who will appreciate the artistic material
Yeah.
as opposed to a child who doesn't care,
Right.
he just wants to have fun.
So it comes back to personal
it's
taste.
Yeah.
All of this
Yeah.
comes out to
Yeah.
personal taste. But
Yeah.
the point is what demographic are you targeting and what appreciation are you going to get?
Yeah.
An artist like myself who plays music for people in a certain demographic, which is mid-20s and up,
Yeah.
I am looking for a certain reaction from that age group because that is the age group I'm communicating with.
Yeah.
If you're making a game like Skyrim, you are not communicating with an 8-year-old. You're
No.
communicating with a mature, adult that wants to have that kind of immersive experience, and that's the kind of experience you want to bring to him, and you want to communicate what life would be like in that situation, and get that emotion back from them. Nintendo is a toy maker because they focus on the 8-year-old kid. I think that they just want to distract and want him to have fun. That doesn't mean it's not art, but they're not getting that communication back. There is no back and forth. They're not seeking anything from it. They're seeking just for a kid to be distracted and have fun, which is cool. And then adults that play Nintendo, more, for nostalgic reasons, for amazing gameplay tuning, we play it as a video game to pass the time. But at no point do we have like these long, crazy discussions about Mario's world and how in depth it is and how it made us cry. And
Have you watched Game Theory?
Yeah. I
Mario
completely
made me cry?
disagree.
Actually, no, that's a good point. You need to watch Game Theory.
no, I haven't seen Game Theory. Has Super Mario made you cry?
Well, it made Jessica cry when Bowser died at the end of Mario Land. So, but it doesn't have to evoke an emotion to be art, and it doesn't have to. You don't have
No,
to.
it
Actually,
Actually-
no. I just thought of a good reason. You need to play Super Mario Galaxy.
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Princess Rosalina and her backstory and
Oh,
what
yeah,
it has caused.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
And what it is insinuating at.
Sure, but we're not talking
Mario RPG. Mario RPG.
Yes.
Mario RPG. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not
That's-
saying that those are
Yeah.
that those don't have artistic merit, and you're kind of missing what I'm saying here. I'm saying
Okay.
Nintendo in itself is a toy maker. Nintendo targets a younger demographic. Nintendo will not shy away from telling you that.
Okay, so all right. Okay, so all right. So I guess I got focused on that. What was the point of that of there being a toy maker? What's the point of pointing that out?
That was actually kind of, I thought that I was just passively saying that, is that maybe that's why I'm not as thrilled with Nintendo right now, because they're still the toy maker. And they don't have the broader demographic. They're not there for the mature audience that will appreciate that art.
Well, see, broader demographic, you could argue they have a broader demographic because they target younger and they have an appeal to older gamers, whereas you completely lose that younger demographic if you do Skyrim.
Right,
Which is
but that's
yeah.
one game in an entire library that also has games for kids. I mean, everything in PlayStation land and Xbox land is not teen and mature. There is also E for Everyone, which is all over the place.
Just Dance.
Well, whatever it is.
Well, I mean, yeah. Can you think of any big titles
I don't
on
play them
PlayStation
because I'm an
4?
adult.
But they only specifically target that, right?
What do
They
you
only
mean?
specifically target those E for Everyone games. Like you said, they don't appeal to you.
They don't appeal to me.
But the Nintendo games do appeal to somebody in your demographic as well.
Sure, I didn't say they don't.
Okay, how does
Where are
Nintendo
you
have a-
confused? Why are you rubbing your forehead? Where are you
Because
confused?
how does Nintendo not have a broader demographic if they appeal to more people?
I don't see how they appeal to more people. Have you seen Wii U sales?
Sales don't mean anything.
Sure they do. It's who's buying it, who's interested.
Well, that has nothing to do with art.
That reflects who cares. No, it doesn't. And I said that multiple times now. We're not... Let's move on.
Okay,
I'm still confused too,
Yeah.
for what that's worth.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm probably just not expressing myself right. I'll just
Yeah.
have to look at it and then we'll clarify.
Because I mean, right,
Well,
right
so-
now, I mean, when Smash Brothers comes out, I mean, that's why we bought a Wii U in the first place.
Yeah.
And then when the next Zelda comes out, I mean, you can kind of argue what demographic they're going with that. Especially, it seems like, are they doing another like darker Zelda with this next one? Have they really said? I mean, like
No,
Twilight
just
Princess.
open
I mean,
world.
that's not
But
really
you also
appealing.
have to. But you got to remember, you're also approaching it through sales. Does not necessarily mean it's because people are viewing it as an art form.
I was introduced to Nintendo as a child. I grew up with Nintendo through Super Nintendo. We got to the N64 generation and I grew up with PlayStation.
Yeah, and as did I. I've
Right.
always preferred PlayStation.
So,
I'm not
that is-
necessarily a fan.
No,
I'm
it's
not,
not
I don't
about
want to say I'm a
preference. I'm
fan.
just saying that I grew up with PlayStation. Where with Nintendo, I didn't get to... If I stayed with Nintendo, I'm not growing up. I'm still Nintendo. I'm still a Nintendo kid. And that's cool, and it's fun. But I'm not getting the same... I'm not getting the same reward, the emotional reward out of a Nintendo game usually than something where if I'm on an Xbox or a PlayStation. There isn't the same effort made in Nintendo to evoke that emotion, to really grip me and really make me think than a lot of games that are in the PlayStation and Xbox libraries. You're playing Mass Effect. You're never going to get, from Super Smash Brothers, you're never going to get that kind of depth. That you
But I
would
don't
find
want
in a
to
Mass
get that kind of depth.
Exactly, and that was my point.
And I understand
it
that.
still
What
evokes
does that have
an
to do with art?
emotion, but it doesn't have to be the same. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same emotion.
It wasn't.
that
We
I get out of
picked
Mass
on it
Effect.
because I simply mentioned Nintendo and said that maybe that's why I'm frustrated with Nintendo, is because they're still on the toy maker mindset,
Okay.
which they are. I'm not saying that their games don't have artistic merit as visual artistic merit, but Nintendo is a toy maker. They're making games specifically just to be fun.
And what's wrong with that?
There is nothing.
Are-
wrong.
Well-
I
games
never said there
supposed
was
to be
something
fun?
wrong with
Well,
that.
no,
mean,
and we can't
games
say
are
for all developers at Nintendo that that's their goal. That's what
course
they're
not.
doing with their games. So I don't think it's fair to do a blanket
Right,
statement.
exactly.
But I you know, if
the hardware is not geared to push it to the next level.
oh, what does that matter? What the does that matter?
How can I create an immersive world? I mean, it's happening
Why does it have to be an immersive world?
because that is another audience that
Keep,
wants
wait. Shovel Knight.
I'll tell you why it needs to be an immersive world.
I still get the same emotions every time I play Chrono Trigger.
I couldn't
It
care
doesn't-
less about him. I don't care. I couldn't care less about Solid Snake.
Right.
He can go away.
Okay,
I'll play
okay.
Mario
So
any
here.
day.
So now let's shift it from what Brian cares about, and let's talk about what the artist
What Amir
cares
cares about.
No.
Let's talk about what Amir cares
No.
about. That's what this is about.
No. I'm not the only person who wants an immersive world in the and gaming.
No. But it doesn't make it more artistic.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, then what's your point?
We'll leave it at that then. The point I was getting at
Yes.
is that if I am a creator and I make video games, I want to do better than my last time. If I write a song today, next year it's going to suck to me because during that year I've matured and I want to make something even better. And that's what every creator wants to do. And if they're not, stop wasting your time because then you're just pencil pushing. The point is that if after 30 years you're still making this guy, there's a problem. Creativity is a problem. Now you're working around this guy.
Oh my God! So putting the big bad wolf, who goes back hundreds of years in your game,
hold on, let me finish the point.
That's original?
Let me finish the point. But if I come in and I say, you know what, I have this great idea. I want to make this more immersive world. And hey, Nintendo, I'd really like to bring this really immersive world to your console. And they say, okay, but we developed a machine that's not really made for that. So sorry, you're not going to be able to make that on our console. You lost this. Now, there's no problem with that. Okay. That doesn't mean that Nintendo is like evil or whatever. It means that Nintendo is in the toy maker mindset. They don't care about pushing it to the next level. They don't care about that stuff. They care about fun games. They will tell you the same thing. So where's the argument here? If Nintendo agrees with that statement, why do you not agree? That's where I'm confused.
Well, I don't know what that has to do with the topic.
Okay. It doesn't. I never mentioned it as part of the topic. You got upset when I said that Nintendo focuses as a toy maker, and that's where it upsets me, and that's how this sidebar discussion started.
Okay.
I even said several times, it doesn't mean that the games aren't art. In fact, I'm the one out of the four of us that said the original Super Mario Brothers was art to me.
Well, it's a semantic argument.
Well, fine, it's a semantic argument, but the point is that I never said it wasn't art. I said that maybe that's why I'm not as happy with Nintendo is because they don't allow these third-party publishers to come in on hardware that is state-of-the-art and be able to push it even more and push their creativity to do more with a higher limitation.
But see, that's the thing, though, is just because they have access to a higher hardware or higher access to a higher limitation doesn't necessarily mean that what they're creating is not art.
I didn't say that either.
That's the thing, though. And I understand why Brian's a little upset, though. You're coming off as saying that.
Right, but I've said countless times now that that's not what I'm saying.
But then but that's the thing, though. The way you're expressing it seems that you're contradicting yourself.
Yeah.
In what way?
That you're saying that you say that it is art, but then you're saying due to their hardware limitations, it's not art.
No.
No.
I'm not saying that it's not art. What I'm saying is that a creator now can't bring his art to that platform.
But then that means you're discrediting it, saying that they're being forced to go to.
It's not discrediting; it's what's going on. That's what publishers are saying. They can't bring certain things to the Wii U because it's not as capable as other hardware. Are they not saying that? Is that not what's happening? Can the Wii U play all these games?
No.
Okay.
Is that a problem?
No, it's not. It's not a problem. I'm saying that for me, that's a problem because on a Nintendo system, I cannot get those kinds of experiences.
But I think we had this discussion before.
And I can pass the time right now with indie games. If I need to pass the time, there's great indie games out there that kind of give me that same nostalgic feeling. And Sega's no longer a hardware manufacturer, so if I want to get that nostalgic feeling from a Sega game, I could get that. I can't get that from Nintendo unless I commit to buying the hardware for that nostalgic feeling. And to me, that's not something I'm going to spend $300 on.
I guess I misunderstood your implication at your frustration with Nintendo as lessening the value of their artistic value.
No, it's just a different target.
Okay, so I misunderstood your reasoning in bringing that up. I took it as being part of the discussion, and it really wasn't. So, my apologies.
There's no reason to apologize. Heated debates are what makes this fun. But at what point, and that's actually why I keep asking this question, is because you guys said that originally Super Mario Brothers would not be art. So at what point does it become art? Is it the narrative that makes it art?
No.
It becomes art to the person once they decide to perceive it as art. But that's why the reason why I said at the time of me playing it, I didn't perceive it as art because I didn't understand it.
Right.
But as I became older, I started to understand creativity, and I started to understand what I perceived as something that was insightful, even if it's not even insightful, even if it's just an image. I started to understand why it affects people, and that's when I started to understand why it's art. So even at the time, I'm 4 years old. I didn't understand it, and that's why I didn't perceive it as art. But by the time I hit...
Did your parents perceive it as art when they saw it in action?
It's because they're on it and the way they perceive. It's what their thoughts on what
Well,
art
how did they
is.
perceive it?
They thought it was a toy. They thought it was a... But that's the thing, though. The vast majority of people, and that's what I said, the vast majority of people are going to view video games or something of that sort as juvenile, and it's not an art form to them because they don't understand it. And that's depending on everyone's viewpoints. That's why like I said, I perceive a vast majority of everything on this planet as a form of art because it's a form of creativity. While a lot of people wouldn't view it as that, they wouldn't say that's not art, that's just a model, that's just something, that's a craft. It's a form of art.
See, to me,
A t-shirt design is a form of art.
Oh, well, it is, but to me, it's more of, I guess I would have to see more of how, the thing that pointed out to me, the differences was the car analogy, because I don't see cars as a work of art. But I suppose that if I saw the people working on its design and seeing those artists, because I never thought of it that way. But until if I was actually there and saw like the people in the design phase, drawing up what the body should look like, how are you going to actually tune it to make it this fast, all this stuff, and then it finally comes out. If I saw all of that progress, I would probably say it's a work of art. And I realize that we're going over, but fuck it.
Well, and it's
This
the
is
same
a topic
reason
that
why
deserves it,
you
for
look
sure.
at one card and you're like, oh, I really like that design, and then you look at like, for us, it's like the Scion and the Cube. You're like, God, it's ugly. Why would anybody drive that?
Yeah. And the thing is that a lot of the people who work on these games they're not always creating new content. Artists don't always just pull it out of their head. They see something and then they emulate that because they think it'll work well in this context. And coders, a lot of the reason why we have such interesting programming is because you don't have to redo the work every single time you want to, put this function together or build an AI script or things like that, which is why we have the same real-time strategy game pathing that we've had for 20 years. I
think all video games are pretty much the same, too. I mean, they all work pretty much the same way, right? Except for the fact that, they're being designed differently as far as polygons and stuff, and they're more 3D. But the ways to trigger certain actions on screen are still the same. They still use those invisible triggers. Before it was just the scrolling to keep the enemies from coming. Now it's more like just don't pass this point, and then the enemies won't come.
Yeah.
I think like the methods are pretty much the same.
Yeah, so I guess my point is, though, is that you have people who you would consider as artists or having artistic ability involved in a project, but then you have a lot of people, and the majority of people who work on a product like a video game or who work on a product like a car who don't have a whole lot of artistic input necessarily. But then the final product, do we consider that, despite the fact that it was kind of manufactured, and that's another word, is manufactured versus crafted.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a good thing to point out.
But what I think, if you look at toys versus art, a toy, and now I'm not saying that you can't have art for art's sake, but a toy is what it is. And what I mean by that is a toy serves the purpose of entertainment and nothing else. It has no intrinsic narrative. It has no intrinsic value beyond being a toy. But a piece of art, when you can identify aspects of the item that are that have their own value beyond the object as a whole, or beyond the purpose of the object, or beyond what it's used for. Because a Metal Gear Solid figurine could be a toy for a 5-year-old, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it is handcrafted, one of a kind, immaculately detailed to the highest levels of technology available at the time. So when that 5-year-old grows up and looks at that toy and sees the detail and identifies the craftsmanship that went into it, and that it is different in some way, perhaps not even identifiably so, but they look at that item and they say, this is different than my other toys, than other things that I think of as toys. And that's the point in which an item becomes more than what it has been labeled. And when something does that, I think that's when it is identified as a piece of art, and is determined to have more artistic value.
Definitely more artistic value if it's unique, but does something have to be unique or in limited access in order to be art? See, to me, and that's the problem that I have. I see it from the artist's perspective, where it's, to me, it's more about what goes into it, not necessarily what the person will get out of it, but what the intention is. In other words, you could have a really crappy game, but you could see that artists were working really hard to try and make that game this super awesome artistic game, but it just didn't catch. You know, that doesn't mean the game is not a work of art. We have a game like Sleeping Dogs, which I remember reading all the reviews, and everybody said, this is obviously a game that pulls a lot of its mechanics from other games. And pretty much all of them said, that's not a bad thing. It's a fun game. It's, you know, and when you play it, because it takes a piece of everything, it becomes its own unique, its own unique presentation. And so to me, if I look at Sleeping Dogs, even though I can recognize that the fighting mechanics are from the Arkham series, and the driving is kind of like a fix on, you know, on certain Grand Theft Auto elements, and then you could see that the world is basically probably actually Deus Ex assets in there. You know, I could see the copycats. But altogether, I still see Sleeping Dogs as like, well, this is a work of art because it has its own unique narrative and it's pushing through those mechanics.
I have a quick question for you then.
This is a really difficult topic.
Yeah.
Using that analogy, would you say The Evil Within is a piece of art?
Yes. Regardless of the fact that I like it or not, it's obvious, and that's why I bought it. And you heard why I bought it. I was excited about the fact that I still remembered all those years back. I forgot the maker's name. I can't believe it.
Shinji Mikami.
Thank you. I didn't want to say Miyamoto because it always wants to come out when it's an M. I'm not good with Japanese name. Anyway, you know, he said when he made Resident Evil 2, he said that the reason that Leon and Claire were in Resident Evil 2 is because he said it wouldn't be a horror story anymore if we brought Chris Redfield back or Jill Valentine back, because they've already been through it. So now they're going to be more like heroes. It's not going to be scary anymore. We need to introduce these new characters. And that's why I loved Resident Evil 2, is because that worked. And it scared me all over again. To see that he was making The Evil Within, to say, and he even said it again all those many years later, and I remembered that he said it for Resident Evil 2. He said it much later. He said, Resident Evil is a different franchise now. It's not scary because these people are heroes now. They're part of that story. They've gone through that narrative already. We got to bring something new. And this was the next phase. I was upset with The Evil Within because of how it was designed and how, I know people say I hate hand-holding, but that was a game that really needed it, and it didn't have it for me. And that made it more frustrating than scary. And so that bothered me with it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have artistic merit. The first thing that I said was, I love The Evil Within's approach to the camera work. You know, that depth of field and putting it right over his shoulder and having him go into focus and then, you know, out of focus when they want to focus on a monster coming in. To feel like there's actually a cameraman and you see it like shaking over your shoulder. It really added that intense claustrophobic vibe. There was a lot of great art assets in there. PT, everybody's talking about it. They love it. I gave it a go. I hate it. It was just a lot of like the same crap just going through the hallway all over again. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have artistic merit.
Right.
I felt the tingling in my head when when there was like a scary scene, and that's exactly the emotion he wanted from me, and he got it. I might have been bored, but that's just my preference, you know.
Yeah.
It didn't suit me, but that doesn't mean Hideo Kojima and Del Toro didn't do some pretty amazing stuff there.
Can gameplay be artistic?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I don't know.
How you interact, because that's how you interact.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you exist in that world.
And there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and and if that doesn't work, then that kills the immersion.
Everything.
Yeah. You know, so at least as far as if a video game, because we can identify individual pieces of art inside of a game.
Yeah.
But if the video game as a whole could be considered a work of art, those elements have to work together, I think, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Even if one element...
Consonance as opposed to dissonance.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's like they don't all have to be good, but they have to work together,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Because if you know, that's why I'm not saying that something like Octodad, Dadliest Catch, isn't artistic and isn't a piece of art on the scale, but is it an example of how video games can be art in the sort of ideal platonic form sense? I don't know that I would say so, because it is a very particular game to control. It's a very particular game to control. We'll say that. But then something like Two Brothers is a very difficult game to control, but it has a lot of elements that work around that mechanic specifically.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that is a more cohesive game than as far as the presentation of the gameplay in with everything else.
And that's the difficult thing, is because often we'll compare quality with the classification of art. And I don't think it really works that way. Like you said, any toy, and I'm struggling with it too, because you said anything to you is a work of art, even a toy. And to me, I can't really say that, because if I get this lightsaber from Toys R Us, and it's just this white stick that lights up, and it's got no detail to it, and it has the paint running off, which is what I was pointing at here, where it was just like, just slap paint on it so that it looks like a lightsaber and just ship it out.
Yeah.
I can't say that that's a piece of art when there's like this $200 lightsaber that looks like a freaking lightsaber, you know? And then you just look at the two and you're like, well, this is a toy, this is art. But is it because of the quality of...
But
is it the output quality that made me say that? What work actually went into this? If I knew what work went into this and how it was designed, maybe what you were saying, like maybe the limitation is I needed to make this Mario within $35. Well, how did you achieve that? Let's see that. And if there was actually somebody in there drawing and saying, oh, it's got to be this material and it's got to be this, and well, we're not going to be able to use these machines if we want it to be $35. We'll have to use these. It's not going to be exact, but you know we're gonna do this to try to. Then it becomes this sloppy Mario becomes something that became sloppy, but it doesn't mean that the artist wasn't meticulous in trying to make it as little sloppy as possible. I don't know how to even word that. So I guess it's more about us knowing what goes into it, and so in that case, is artistic merit measured by the effort or by the output?
That's very tricky.
An hour and 37 minutes to get to the money question.
But you got to also factor in it's really on your own personal opinion, because look at artists nowadays. There are guys literally pulling out a frame, putting it on the wall, and saying that's art.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that's not art.
I met
I don't agree with it.
I met a woman who was an artist, and she was
I don't
freaky.
Let me rephrase that. I think it's a form of art because your expression, the concept of nothingness.
Yeah.
But I don't like it because it's the same as the being abstract art. It does not appeal to me.
Yeah.
Am I discrediting it? It's art? No, it's not. It is a form of art because you're trying to express something. It doesn't matter the level of quality. It doesn't matter the level of depth to it. It's a form of art.
I want to throw this in here because this is something that I heard from a girl I tried to date and failed, rejected. Anyway, the girl was an artist and she was a damn good one. But a lot of her art was more about before she would display her stuff in an art gallery. Her biggest thing was that she put a lot of effort in was index cards explaining what the art was and how she got into painting it, how she went about making it, why she went. The most important part she told me was why I made it, what I want to convey, and what I want in receipt. And that was, for her, the most important thing. And I asked her why, because I'm on the musician side, and I don't have all that stuff. I don't explain why I write a song.
Right.
Those are my life experiences in there. That's why I write the song. And to her, she said that is what gives your art artistic merit. Because when somebody goes up there and they look at your painting, they may not understand it immediately. And so they may ask the artist questions. And your ability to answer those questions, to get that aha, that's what gives you artistic merit. But if somebody comes up to you, and she said, and the reason that gives it artistic merit is that if somebody comes up to you and you have an empty frame on the wall, and they say, well, why is that art? It's an empty frame. And you stutter. They know you just put an empty frame on the wall. But if you put an empty frame on the wall and you said, I wrote this, I actually chose that frame material because it made me feel like it's oak, and it made me feel like this, and I related this feeling with oak for some reason, and then start talking about the wood and the tree's life and all of this stuff, and you go into all of that stuff. Now you've given this empty frame an entire story and a reason for existing, and now it's art.
The frame is an interesting analogy because, and kind of tying in, because you can take a toy and frame it. And I don't mean like literally, but I mean you put it in a frame, you create a narrative around it, and you've created art. But the toy is still a toy, but you've created art by giving it that intrinsic value, because and then that's what nostalgia really is. It is making art out of the past. It's remembering individual experiences and then putting the narrative around them, so that they are valuable. They're intrinsically more important than they were at the time. But with art, okay. So I'm not saying the frame on the wall in and of itself, a frame on the wall is just a frame on the wall. But why is the frame on the wall?
Yes.
Okay. So we said earlier that a game didn't necessarily have to have a narrative, and I guess that means it doesn't. What we meant by that was that it doesn't necessarily have to have a good story, or a unique story, or a special story, or any story at all. But it has to be able to convey something, and it has to be able to convey something beyond what it appears to be on the surface.
It's that something that sticks with you.
Yeah.
So is it something that does it need to have the intention to convey that?
Well, and that's the other thing is, like, if the intention was there, but nobody can see it.
To me, that's still art.
How do we measure that value?
Yeah.
Because if an artist has the intention to evoke,
we should also change that word from value to merit. Doesn't have merit.
There's a merit.
Because value is in how much of it is available, right? If it's in abundance, it's got no value. And that's how we got into the manufactured part. I would say more, does it have artistic merit?
That's a good synonym.
If you create something, but nobody gets what the hell you were doing.
Yeah, and you die and left no notes.
Yeah. Damn index cards, she was right.
And that's sort of the thing, is like there's no narrative. But when somebody comes up to it, I bet it was raining the day you did that. Then all of a sudden.
Yes.
Yes. And that's all. I bet it was raining the day you did that. And now we have this. It has value all of a sudden. And I can't completely explain what value, what merit it has at this point.
Right.
But it is more than just an object.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you don't have to get it for it to still be art. To me, I still like what Brian said about that sliding scale of like it's all art. It's just because to me, if an artist has to explain what was going on during that, it kind of loses that art to me. It's not that I still don't say that it's art, but it's like to me I don't get it, and I don't have to. I suppose that's the difference between art and what I would consider good art, because it's always that something that sticks with you years afterwards, like whether it be a song or a picture or a video game or a toy from my childhood, you know. It's something that sticks with you for a long time, is what I would just call the good art.
I think the trick into a lot of modern art pieces is that it's not really the item, it's the explanation. That's the art. That's the work of art.
Isn't it open to interpretation, though?
Oh, sure.
Because that's the whole thing for me, is that...
Because I was awful in language arts, especially when we went over the poems, because for some reason, even though they would word the question as, what is your opinion of this poem, my answers were always wrong, because I would come up, you know, like, I think that they meant da-da-da-da, and she's like, oh no, what he really meant, I was like, well then why did you word it as a what's my opinion? I just gave you my opinion.
Well, that's the problem with visual art. That's why I hate the concept of art classes. It shouldn't be about...
Oh, our art teacher was good, because he would give us... We'd all have the same first, 3 projects, but then he'd go over it with us, like, oh, I think you'd be good at this, and I think you would like this, and he would all, you know, then after that we'd all be in our separate...
That's what I'm saying.
Some of them would have pointillism.
I don't like the ones that are trying to say,
pencils.
Here's this artist, what are they trying to convey, or something like pushing things on you. If you're wanting them to be an artist, you want to nurture creatism. If you see that they are creative towards this, nurture that. Don't
because then my next
them.
language art teacher would say, oh, I see that, you know, she's not as good as this, but she does really good in, comparing the other. Like, she would just let me write however I wanted to write and then grade it as that, whereas the other teacher said, oh, no, you should have used these words and you should have worded it this way, and I'm like...
Yeah. No.
This is why I went into interpretation. One of my happiest moments in studio, and there weren't many, because studio work is never happy. It's a lot of freaking work. A lot of my health issues now come from the fact of all that work and not sleeping. But one of the greatest times, a feeling of achievement, was that I was running late on a studio session, and my producer and engineer actually had a session coming up right after me, and it happened to be one of my best friends, who was also a singer, and he was coming in to do his vocal tracks and saw me in the isolation booth doing my vocal tracks, and said, no, just keep doing takes till he's got it. It's fine, you know, we'll just go later. And he let it go, but he got to hear the song, so because I had to keep doing all these takes. So I finally come out of the isolation booth, and I see him, and he shakes my hand and he says, dude, that's an awesome song. I never heard that before. And now we had spoken like a week before, and I know he was going through this really bad breakup. And he was basically like, so is it about, you know, and he's trying to decipher the lyrics, and he's like, so is it about, you know, like this guy and this girl, you know, like I feel like it's about this guy and this girl, and they're breaking up, and they're doing this, and they're doing that. And he was totally describing to me, without even realizing it, his entire situation with this girl. And even kind of letting me know things that he was keeping to himself.
Yeah.
And I was hearing him talk, and I was like, wow, I'm really learning about like the deepest parts of this guy, who's my best friend.
Yeah.
Just because he heard these lyrics. And in truth, the lyrics were just about an apple. That's all it was. I opened up my fridge, and I saw an apple, and I took a bite, and I imagined what it would be like for this piece of this apple to go through my digestive system, and just metaphorically write all about that, and it's and how similar it is to a human life from birth to death. And I just called it Insignificance, because the song was completely insignificant to the story of the entire album, because it was a concept album.
Right.
And he just told me, and I felt so accomplished. Now, not much later, about a month later, my producer and engineer had finally introduced like the 2 next songs, and he told me, with these, try not to write something so depressing. And I told him, I was like, well, did you find that like all the songs I wrote so far were depressing? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, why do you feel depressed? And he said, what do you mean? I don't feel depressed. Just stop writing depressing songs. And I said, well, no, these songs aren't depressing. They're worded in a way where your impressions are, you're either going to be happy or sad listening to them by the words chosen because you're going to relate to them. So you're either sad about this specific item or you're happy about it. And that is my art. That's what I enjoy doing. I'll manipulate the music into you interpreting it your way. And to me, that's what's important in music, is that you feel you can relate. And almost like a video game maker tries to make their games broader for a broader audience, when I write a song, I take, especially the song is done in a week. The lyrics take me 2 to 3 months because the point of the lyrics is for me to make it as broad as possible so that you can interpret it your way and connect with me in whatever way you can connect. It turned out he was depressed, you know, and that's what I learned from that. And to me, even though people didn't catch on to what it was, even though he didn't realize it was about an apple and started talking to me about his girlfriend, that is how I wanted it interpreted. Even though he interpreted it wrong technically, it's exactly what I wanted. And we connected on 2 levels. He heard the song and I connected with him, and then he talked to me and our friendship got even deeper. And to me, whether you get it or not, I still think that there is artistic merit in the intention and the work that you put in trying to do it. My CDs are over there. I never marketed them or tried to sell them. Only my friends have bought them. Only my friends text me occasionally and say thank you, and I say why, and they say track number. You know, to me that is awesome. I don't need to sell it or manufacture it. That was the reason I recorded it. It was for me to get it out. And if somebody interprets it, whether they get it right or wrong, doesn't matter, as long as you connect with me.
But even if you don't, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have artistic merit.
Yeah. So, man, this is such a difficult topic because it's.
Yeah.
And does it fall into like our video games art, or is it that we just don't know the definition of art?
There
it's
is
so
no
hard to
definition
define
of art.
art.
That's been
Can we
argued
really call
for
video games an art
decades.
form?
Yeah, so it's, once again, it's really on your own preference.
Yeah.
One thing I do know is
There
that
are
games
people-
are not toys.
Yeah.
They can be. They absolutely can be, but I don't think that if you look at a video game and you see a 35-year-old playing it, and that guy never grew up, he's still playing with toys, that is a massive misunderstanding. That is you just not being educated on the product and just immediately judging it. I'm sorry if it sounds like I ramble on, but I wanted to talk about something else because we always have a wrestling reference. But that was another thing that recently got me upset, that I had sat down on my patio surrounded by people, and quickly the discussion turned into wrestling. Somebody was a wrestling fan, and we started talking about wrestling, and this girl walked in on us and was like, "Wrestling is stupid." I was like, well, what's stupid about it? It's stupid. They stand around in their underwear, they say stupid shit, and I was like, well, do you know that like wrestlers don't know technically what they're gonna say? That it's improv a lot of the times? Doesn't matter, it's stupid. That's why it's stupid, because they'll just say stupid stuff because they don't know what they're supposed to say. It's stupid. And that's all she got from it, and she thought that it was an immature product. And wrestling fans get that a lot, like adult gamer fans get that. You know, like people will just view it as a toy and say, well, grow up, stop playing video games, you know, or, you know, oh, you watch wrestling, that's fake. And then you tell them, well, go watch a movie, that's fake too. You know, to me, wrestling is an art form. People will talk about, you know, Bret Hart, for example, who had a storied career of 20 years and never injured a person, but never threw a phantom punch either. So how do you punch somebody in the face and have him show up the next day without a black and blue? That's art, you know. Yeah.
Well, it's skill anyway, but
it's skill, but there is an art to it. You know?
Yeah, no, definitely.
but like you were saying, it's really on your own perspective. She doesn't view it as that way because she doesn't understand it.
Right, and that's why I was saying about the car thing, too.
Even if she understood it, it's really just how she perceives it.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people, like when, like nowadays, of course, when it was first came out, they all viewed comic books as being juvenile, and then eventually, because of Congress pressing the Comic Act where they couldn't be violent and all this, because they were still accepting it, thinking it's juvenile, and also it's brainwashing our kids, thinking it's more than that when it's not. And then eventually people have gotten to come older and realize and accept that they think comics are a form of art, because there's more than just the art. There's the storytelling in the fact and what it's and what its influence on people is. Same for video games. It's just because of a lot of people perceive it as juvenile. Hell, I play a miniature war game. There's a board with made terrain that's plastic, and you have plastic.
God, that's stupid.
Army.
That's my point. No, this is my point, though. I can't even tell you how many times I've been in like a tournament or something, and a lot of it, because there's a large amount of people, a lot of it has to be done in the mall because the store's a part of. And you'll see people walk by, and it's almost, some of them are interested and like, what are they doing? And then some of them that just like look at you, and it's just like they look down upon you. Same as like people that play Magic. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean I don't like it, and just because you think it's juvenile doesn't think that I think it is. I think even though it's a miniatures game and all, I view it as art. Even though I'm putting the model together, I'm actually physically painting it to what I decided.
Absolutely.
And even playing the game, because if I could really do what I really wanted to do, I would actually create the actual table, modulate the actual terrain, build the actual buildings, paint everything to the smallest detail.
Because that is the maturity of the artist I was talking about. That once you get started with one thing, once you get creative with this one thing, it becomes, when you're done with it, you say, I could do more. And it becomes addictive. You want to create more.
Exactly. But my point was, like I said, some people don't view it as art.
I can't read that because my glasses are not on. I don't know what just happened.
But I view it as art, and I enjoy it. Other people aren't going to. And one day, honestly, because it's such a niche culture, it's probably never going to be viewed as a major form of art. But me, personally, like, I can go into, like, a train store, or I love just looking at them. I don't even have to play with them. I just like looking and seeing like at like Civil War museums or World War II museums where I actually made a table and like they actually have, they're put in the place, but seeing the actual waves crash up on the beach, seeing the actual, like, we'll say it's like a Normandy invasion diorama. I love that. Just looking at the small details in it.
Yeah.
And I view it as art. Some people just say, oh, it's a diorama, or it's just models.
And that's the art you relate to.
Exactly.
And so you give it more value for yourself. But regardless if somebody says that it's stupid or somebody doesn't agree with what you say, I still think that just the effort that goes into it is what gives it artistic merit. So I don't think we could go around the table because there's no question that really any of us can answer because it's totally opinion-based and we pretty much covered it. So let's go around the table with closing statements. Because at this point, it looks like we've got a two-parter.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's fine. We'll just ourselves.
I would say let's close off with just closing statements. We'll start with you, Brian.
All right. So I guess to bring this around, I'll use filling words and just kind of express myself in a way that doesn't actually say a whole lot because I'm not sure what I'm going to be saying. So I'm trying to think of something as I'm speaking as eloquently as I possibly can without umming and and too much while I am continuing to cogitate on the various topics that we have brought up in this discussion around this table with a pizza in the middle and various and sundry drinks and tablets.
By the way, only one slice.
One slice, yes. Yeah.
You guys should know that this was 45 minutes of driving back and forth just to bring you this damn pizza. Nobody liked it. Why?
It wasn't pretzel
because
pizza.
It was a $5 pizza, and I'm a cheap bastard.
No, because we had hibachi before.
There was that, and it wasn't pretzel
fucking
pizza.
Hibachi.
You want it and you come.
Anyway. No,
Missed opportunity.
you know.
Hibachi's art.
Yes, it is, actually.
We didn't actually sit at the table. We just sat in the dining room.
Still art.
Cooking is art.
It definitely requires, I think, it requires the hand or the input from something in order to be art. because I was just thinking about beautiful things in nature, and could we consider, say, a flower or a piece of art, despite the fact that it is mass manufactured, to a certain degree. And we really haven't touched on the relationship of beauty with art, which is something that was almost inextricable for a very long time in that discussion. But it seems that we've come around to, there has to be a sign of a maker somewhere. And in order for the artistic merit to be identifiable. And that's the one sort of constant that I've sort of picked up, is that there has to be the hand of a maker identifiable in there. And without that identification, it becomes much more difficult to determine if an item is elevated to the status of art, despite the fact
that was perfectly said, by the way. Keep going.
That
I almost
there
want to have
is
like a song in the background for you.
there is artistic merit to everything that has been made.
How would you like to close off, Jason?
See, I could actually go a little bit off of that, because you went to the extent of saying that there has to be a creator for it to be defined of art, but once again, it's really is how you perceive it, because some people can actually see nature as art.
Yeah.
Well, how do you perceive it?
It's something that inspires you.
So art,
Or also, anything that inspires you is a form of art. Seeing
video games have definitely done that.
seeing someone's way of trying to create something, even if it's just something as just needing something to be able to generate revenue for themselves, is, in my view, a form of art. So in all technicality, I view pretty much everything as art, being from the smallest pebble to the entirety of the universe to really anything. It's all a form of art.
What do you think?
I don't know. I kind of like what you said earlier about it invoking an emotion, because that's like what I said earlier about, to me, the good art is something that hits me hard enough that I remember it later on. And to me, in relation to video games, it was when I first played Chrono Cross, since it was the first RPG that I really played, and it was really the first game that made me sit there and bawl. Particularly and it was mostly from the music in that game also, because it was the scene that you see in the past where the orphanage is burning down, and that song that plays in the background. I sat there and just cried for like 10 minutes before I even like hit the button to go what the next, what the next piece of dialogue was, and that was always what hit me was for my love of RPGs, because I bawled quite a few times through the rest of the game. And it's like what you said, is little just pixelated faces. There's no real, detail to anything really, but it was all just the dialogue and the music. It's usually still what gets me, is the story and the music. There doesn't even have to be a picture there. If I could just get an audiobook of it, I'd probably still love it. But yeah, I suppose to me it's the evoking that emotion. And that's what I was going to say too about the Mario. I was like, he might not be art to you, but little fucker makes me grin every time I walk in there and I see him.
No, he does. He is art to me.
So
how did I get tagged that I don't think Mario's art? I kept saying Mario's art. Damn it.
what did you just talk about? Look at the fucking face. I mean,
You're talking about this specific Mario.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Look,
No, yeah.
he just makes me grin every time I see him.
Yeah, no, he does. I mean, like, when I saw him, I was like an 8-year-old at GameStop. The first impression that I got was, that's a really big Mario. I kind of want it. Mm-hmm. And then the next one is like all the memories that he brought up to me while the guy was like walking that Mario up to me and saying, this is the only one I've got. And then I was like, all right, he's mine. And then, my wife thought I was freaking nuts when I walked out of the store. I was supposed to just put $10 pre-order on something. Instead, I came out with this giant freaking Mario. I was like, well, we got a new house. I'm going to put him on the shelf. She was like, just return that. No. I'll think about it. And then like the next day I was like, every time I look at this, it's exactly like you. Every time I look at this Mario, I think about all those times, when I was a kid, and Mario kept me busy through like those really difficult times, and that's kind of what I leaned on. To me, artistic merit is more from the artist's point of view, and not necessarily what the person on the other end might perceive, because I think that's open to interpretation.
Absolutely.
Obviously, but when somebody goes into it and says, I want to, and I think the key word is create, I want to create this, and sits down and meticulously does it, and sees the imperfections and tries to perfect them, but nobody's perfect, so some imperfections remain. I think that's what gives artistic merit to something is the effort, the love, the emotion that you pour into it. It's an extremely difficult topic for me because, like I said, the definition of art is so broad, especially now, that it's very difficult. But I will say, I could be a very hypersensitive individual, especially during the day, especially in the morning. I can't believe I'm going to say this on YouTube because even my wife doesn't know. But
exclusive.
I can actually sit down on the couch, and if it's the morning and I'm eating breakfast and I watch a commercial, there could be absolutely no freaking reason whatsoever. You look at me and think I'm psychotic. I will start freaking crying from like a typical commercial of like a dad patting his kid on the head. But the weird thing is for me is like I don't see the commercial and I don't just see the dad patting his kid on the head. I see all of this collaboration, all of this work between all of these people that come together and have this impression of what a father and a son should be like. And they're trying to sell a product. It's not about the father and the son. But you could see all of this influence and all of this upbringing with artists coming together to make this commercial, to push something, to try to evoke that emotion from you so that you will relate it with the product. And to me, that is awesome. There is nothing better in the world to me than seeing a whole bunch of artists that are creative in their own rights and want to express themselves as individuals coming together as a team to express something broader, something much bigger, and with the intention of pleasing you in whatever way it is to communicate with you. And in several occasions, it's without a single word. It's that time in Skyrim where I walk from a sunny day to a stormy night, and I could feel that entire transition, and knowing that there were 100 people at play to make that small little transition in 5 minutes of a 100-hour game happen. And so if somebody asks me if video games are an art form, I would say absolutely. If they were just toys, we would have been done with them by now. It would have ended with Atari, and it would have been, and it almost ended with Atari. And Nintendo came with more power, but that fad would have been over too, right? I mean, like the kids would have grown up and said, "Well, we don't play with toys anymore." So if video games were toys, why are we still playing? So I get what you're saying with everything in the world being art. I think it takes some artistic merit and intention, but overall I agree. And to me, it's almost without a doubt that video games are an art form, even the simplest ones.
Tetris.
Pong.
And on that note,
And on that note, put a bow on it.
Put a bow on it.
that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. All right.
Put a bow on
Well,
it.
guys, thanks for joining us. Remember, the discussion doesn't end with the 2-hour video that we're going to split into 2 parts. We would definitely, especially for a topic such as this, we would love to hear from you, see what you think. Please post in the comment space below. Let us know what you think. And if you have any ideas for other topics you'd like for us to discuss, definitely let us know that as well. We look forward to seeing you next week. And with that,
Put a bow on it. Later, guys.
bye, guys.